Hello and welcome to this workshop on how to use some of the tools in KeyShot to create an advertisement look for your products. So by manipulating things such as the model positioning, environment lighting, plus different camera settings, you can start to add emotive responses or even tell a story with your still imagery. So for this workshop I'm going to be focusing on this watch model that I found on the KeyShot Cloud Library. And as you can see at the moment, I've kind of positioned it so there is focus on the front face of the watch, but I can still see kind of the strap in the background. If I just zoom out quickly, you can see that it is floating above the main ground. So I do at the present moment in time just have this kind of ground shadow to show that it is not resting on anything. Currently in my settings, I have set up a camera. So this is kind of like the final camera angle that I want to use for the main scene, but I will show you a bit later on some other settings that I might add in here just to add further manipulation. For the purpose of this workshop, I will be creating my own HDRI. The first thing I'm going to do is go to that lighting tab and take it off the basic preset and change it onto the product preset. What the product preset will allow you to do is turn on things like your ground and globe illumination so that KeyShot can calculate how light interacts between the floor within KeyShot, as well as how it can bounce between the different parts within the main model. And it also increases some of the parameters that already exist in there, such as the shadow quality and the ray bounces. Okay, with that as my main starting point, I can then start to build up my own HDRI. So here I'm just going to click on to create a new environment, and at this stage you can give it a name if you wish. Now for the main background, rather than it being a solid colour, I'm going to apply it as a gradient, and I'm just going to manipulate kind of where those positionings are of those two colours. Now rather than it being a white floor, I'm going to have it kind of just slightly off grey within there, so it's not a quite bright light. And again, I'm just going to make sure that one is going to be a black setting and to be happy with the initial positioning of it. So you can see what is the effect it's having on the model is it's just adding a little bit of a light source from the base so that that bottom part is illuminated. Now before I've added any pins in, I can see where the kind of shadowing is, and it is quite distracting from the main model itself. So for the purpose of this scene, I'm going to turn off ground shadows to kind of give the impression that this watch is floating in space. Eventually I'll also be changing the background colour, but whilst I am building the HDRI, I'm going to leave it on lighting environment so I can see where those pins are in the real-time window. So add a pin in, I'm just going to click on the add pin option, and then I can start to manipulate the positioning using that canvas. I could also kind of increase the radius of that circular light pin. Again, just make sure that the positioning is how I want it to be. Now when you add pins in, they do initially come in as white colouring, but you can change this to a coloured light anywhere on the spectrum, or you could use the Kelvin scale, which is a kind of scale that is similar to what you will find with light bulbs, whether or not it is a warm orange light or a cooler blue light. If you are going to be kind of using the Kelvin scale, I would recommend just manipulating the brightness, because you may find that when you add the colouring to it, it's a bit darker than what you'd find the normal white light to be. Now when you add a pin in, it does open up the highlight option at the bottom. So if I left click anywhere on my screen now, it will reposition that active pin. But if I hold down the control key and then left click, it will add in additional pins. Okay, so do be mindful of that one, because if you just want to change the camera angle, you may accidentally be moving the pin rather than the camera itself. So again, as you start to kind of add in your different pins, you may want to manipulate the colorings and the brightness of each of them to help build up the kind of scene and look that you're after. Okay. So I'm just going to start repositioning them, and as well as doing it within the main canvas at the top, you can manipulate it using the azimuth and elevation values that you can find in the transform section at the bottom. Sometimes these can be a bit easy to help control minor movements within there if you just want to highlight certain sections of it, because sometimes you can find moving it in the canvas or the real-time window can cause it to jump around quite a lot. Now, as well as circular pins, you can also have rectangular pins within here, where you can manipulate the X and Y values independently of one another, okay, to create kind of more beams of light. Yeah. This can help add in different highlights that you may want in there to have focal points on different sections. Again, I've just kind of manipulated the colouring in there. I've gone for more of a cold light in this case, which can be quite useful when you're working with black materials because it can make the black stand out a little bit more. And again, it's just a case of positioning it roughly where you want so it is lighting the scene how you want it to be. Now, if you're not sure where it is lighting it to begin with, it is recommended to be able to toggle on and off so you can see, is it definitely highlighting it as you expect. Now, when it comes to creating HDRIs, it is best to kind of start off with a 3-point light option. So you've got them going from your different angles within there. You can have like your key light, which is your main focal point, your fill light to get rid of any of the kind of dark areas that you may want within there, and then a background light, which is kind of something what I'm building now, which can help move the model away from the background so it doesn't blend in with it. Okay, so I may want to kind of have that just on the bottom there, so this base of the model isn't quite as lost when I change that background color. And again, you can use either the canvas or the transform options to manipulate it for kind of more accurate positioning. Now, when it comes to products that have got screens on, you may want to kind of add in a beam of light directly across the display to break it up. So for these ones, I would recommend using the rectangular ones, purely because you can then change the X and Y independently of one another, but also because you have this angle option, so it doesn't have to be vertical or horizontal. You can put it at a degreed angle of your choosing. Again, I'm just going to make this bit more of a colder light to begin with, and just increase that brightness ever so slightly. So positioning wise for this one, I want it to be kind of over the main screen itself. So I can just add it in where I want it to be. And if I wanted to have the same pin exactly again, I can right click on that and duplicate it. And again, then for this one, I just may want to just kind of slightly reposition whereabouts it's going to be. To maybe highlight more the bottom section of the screen in this case. Okay. Now, when you're happy with your kind of lighting positions that you've got within there, when you've made a place like brightness, if things are too bright or not bright enough, at that point you can then jump to your settings tab and change that background color if you are not wanting to see those pins. Okay. So for the background color, you may want to change it off Kelvin if it comes like that to begin with, and then you can then specify kind of what color you want it to be. Now, just so we don't completely lose the black strap in the background, I'm just having it slightly off black so everything is still seen. You may just see this icon in the top right of your screen, and that's just to let you know the HDRI has been edited, and if you click on that one, it will just update it. However, what you've been seeing in your real-time window is the effect that those pins are creating. If you know this is something that you're going to want to use over multiple models, under the HDRI editor, you can always save this, and it will save it into your library for future use. So that's how you can start to manipulate your own lighting within there to create different mood effects that you're after. So now I'm just going to have a little bit of drama using the cameras. Now, at the moment, I've already got my camera set up, and this is kind of the angle that I am after, and also the correct zoom level. Within your camera option, you've also got depth of field. Now, with depth of field, what it does, it adds a blur to your models, and it can help create a focal point. So if you click on the crosshairs next to focus distance, you can then select different areas on your model to have the main focal point within there. You then have your f-stop, which then is how far either side of that focus distance is going to be in focus. Now, for this one, it is kind of recommended maybe to bring up that geometry view window, because within the geometry view window, you can see then these blue panes. The solid blue pane is where your focus distance is, and you can also click within your geometry view window to manipulate that positioning as well. especially if you want to really make sure that a specific area is the main focus point. Then the two lighter panes either side is showing where the f-stop is. So here you can then start to type values in and you can see those planes move away. And anything in between those two lighter blue planes is going to be in focus, and anything outside of it, whether or not it's in front or behind, will start to lose focus. When you're happy with the positioning, make sure you hit done on that focal point in the menu at the bottom. Otherwise, if you left click anywhere, you may find you start to change all those settings. So you can now see with this depth of field turned on, kind of the main face of the watch has got focus on it, but the leather strap in the background is starting to blur out. So we can still see the product, it's just the eye is being drawn to the main face of the watch. Once you're happy with your positioning, make sure you save that camera. You can either click the save button to override the previous one, or I could have clicked on new camera to create a new one, so I haven't lost that initial camera with no depth of field on. Now to add an extra element within here, I'm going to use the scattering medium to add a bit of kind of fog look within it. So to begin with, I need a new model. So going to the model section and geometry, I'm just going to drag and drop this cube into my scene. It's going to increase the scale of the cube and make sure it is centered, and that is just so it covers that entire scene within there. Going back to materials, under scattering medium, I'm going to be using this OpenVDB, and it's just going to be the cloud white. You also have different options. You could have fog or a foam if you want to create kind of like more of a sponge effect within there. With these OpenVDB options, if I just double click to edit, it has all been driven by a volume map texture, and these all come with the software itself. Now to begin with, I'm just going to click fit to part, so therefore the scale of the texture itself is going to match the scale of the cube that I've brought in. Using the move texture option, I can then just kind of reposition roughly where I want kind of this cloud source to be. When I'm happy with the positioning, I can then hit tick to close that move tool. Now at the moment, the kind of cloud fog that's there is quite dense. I can't really see too much of my model. It's kind of giving a hint of what the model might be, but it's not really showing me exactly what it is. So that's where under the properties, I can start to kind of like manipulate different things. So to begin with, I could manipulate the transmission. So again, if I just use that curve scale, maybe I want to have a bit more of a kind of a bluer fog within there, just a bit lighter. And I want to increase that transparency distance so that more light is going through, so I can see kind of more of the model. Okay. So you can either use the slider or you can type values in. Now at the moment, even though I can start to see more of the model, maybe some of the cloud work is a little too dense. You can also kind of reduce the density, so it's more of a kind of a subtle cloud in the background, and it's just adding like a fine particles within there again, just to add a little bit more of kind of a story behind it, make it a bit more out of this world kind of look for this particular scene. Now I might be happy with the overall look with my lighting within there, the camera position, and even this kind of fog look over the front. But one thing you can then do after that is jump to your image tab to further manipulate some of the kind of camera exposures. So for this one, I'm going to jump to photographic to begin with. And as it is a product shot, I do recommend doing the image transform as a high contrast to begin with. Here you can then start to kind of like manipulate different things, like if I wanted to add a bit more light into the camera, bring in the exposure, or even manipulate some of the contrast elements. I can start to just use these sliders to make those changes. You also have your curve histogram, which will then narrow down different sections, such as like your shadow options or your kind of like mid-tone colors. And these can just start to, again, bring out the different areas to add more focus in to different sections of your scene. Because it might be that some areas look a bit dull, but if you play around with the environment lighting anymore, it starts to blow different areas out. Such things such as like the saturation of color. If I wanted more of the copper elements to come through and the orange elements of the lights, I can start to increase the vibrance and saturation within there. You do have the option to turn the denoise on. Just bear in mind that it might start to blend together some of the textures that you've got within there. So it might be recommended to just reduce that value down. And if you are having denoise on, do have a look at the sharpen option to see if that can help bring out some of those textures or labels that you've got in place. So for example, if you focus on the label and the dials of the watch, now if I just toggle that sharpen off and then on again, you can see they stand out that little bit more. Okay, just keep playing around with those settings until you're happy with the final look. And there we have it. That is how you can use some of the tools within KeyShot to create more dramatic scenes for your products. Within this scene, we've created things using the HDRI environment, we've changed the different camera settings within there, and we've explored some of the image tab options, again, just to further make those renders pop. Thank you for listening.